Okay, now we can start. Shall we?
Yeah.
Because so packed, we need to start.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ruhani Rahman, your host for the 8th SAEC Annual Economist Conference 2025. Welcome to the Breakout Session 2, Labor Market Issues. I'd like to give the floor to the Chair, Dr. Injamanul Islam, former Special Advisor, Employment Sector, International Labour Office.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks to SANEM for inviting me to come and share this breakout session on labor market. And thanks to all of you for joining this morning. What I find from the program is that we will have 4 papers to be presented, and we have 1 discussant. And I'm told out of the 4 papers, 2 will be presented virtually and 2 from here. And I have also been told by the organizers that each paper will presenters will get 10 minutes, and I can take 5 minutes at the beginning, if you don't mind, because I have been allowed to take that. And I have also been allowed to take another 5 minutes. I'm not sure whether I'll do that at the end. Okay. Now, without wasting any more time, let me start by taking my 5 minutes, if I may, at this stage, saying just a couple of words about the basic theme of this particular session. I think it's titled Labor Market Issues, which is broad enough to cover almost everything on earth. But I looked at the titles of the papers to be presented, and I was fortunate to get a little more idea about the papers from their abstracts and earlier presentations, the PowerPoint presentations and so on. I got the impression that they cover basically 2 broad themes relating to the labor market. One is functioning, and one I can call the outcomes. I don't know if that would be an appropriate description of the coverage of the 4 papers. I would seek apologies if they don't, but that's my understanding. Now, functioning of the labor market, if you go back to the basics, you would say that demand and supply and so on and so forth. But by now, I think we all know that that's not all. That's not all. It goes beyond demand and supply issues, particularly in developing countries. And the presentations this morning, the one I think that will, no, I think the second, or we will have one on hierarchies, caste, gender in employment. We already know that there are what we call, there is what we call labor market segmentation. So it's not as simple as just labor supply framework and so on and so forth. And then if we talk about outcomes, we know that wages and earnings depend not only on demand and supply, on a variety of factors. So I suppose between these 4 papers, we will have a little bit of a glimpse of labor market, both functioning and outcomes in a much broader framework than the conventional framework that we are familiar with. And in fact, I heard Salim Raihan saying that we need to think out of the standard approaches, and we need to be a little innovative. I suppose this would be a good beginning. So I would now call upon the first presenter, Sabiha Sharmeen, who will be presenting a paper titled What Influences the Paycheck? Macroscopic Analysis of Gender Wage Gaps Across Economies. We are going straight into the labor market outcomes. So you have your 10 minutes from now. I suppose someone will be maintaining the time. I don't have to do that dirty job. Okay, good. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a lovely morning, not just a sleepy one. I am Sabiha Sharmin, an economics graduate from the University of Dhaka. I'll be presenting my paper titled What Influences the Paycheck? A Macroscopic Analysis of Gender Wage Gaps Across Economies. Gender wage gap, a term that is so self-explanatory that it needs no introduction. So I'll give you an overview of what is the state of gender wage gap worldwide. So according to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2023, the global gender pay gap stands at around 20%. This means women globally earn on average about 80% of what men earn. At the same time, the International Labour Organization reports that as of 2022, women's average wages are about 77% of men's, reflecting a gender wage gap of 23%. But where does this gender wage gap stems from? Researchers have found various micro and macro factors contributing to this gender wage gap. Therefore, a comprehensive analysis that considers both micro-level determinants and macroeconomic influences is crucial to understand the gender wage gap. Hence, my research objective to investigate the main factors influencing the gender wage gap differences and how the gender wage gap manifests at a macroeconomic level. One of the earliest explanation of the wage gap comes from Mainzer in 1974, who argues that differences in human capital investment, particularly in education and experience, are the primary causes of wage discrepancies between men and women. But Blue and Kahn demonstrated that by 2010, traditional human capital variables such as education and experience explained a much smaller portion of the gender wage gap. Instead, industry and occupational differences became the dominant factors, with women more likely to be concentrated in lower paying occupation. Kunz further emphasizes that as women have increased their education and labor market participation, demand-side factors including discrimination, occupational segregation, and farm-level wage-setting policies have become more influential in maintaining the wage gap. Olivetti and Petrangolo in 2014 explored the gender wage gap from a cross-country perspective, highlighting how variation in labor market institutions, service sector employment, and family policies contribute to differences in wage disparities among nations. Similarly, another paper identified a wage penalty for occupation that became female-dominated, arguing that rather than productivity differences, discrimination against women's labor explains why wages in predominantly female jobs tend to be lower. These studies collectively indicate that the gender wage gap is a complex issue shaped by both supply side and demand side factors. So this research aims to bridge the gap by analyzing micro and macro factors' effect on gender wage gap by using an unbalanced cross-country panel dataset for a sample covering 43 countries for the period 2017 to 2021. Our dependent variable is gender wage gap, which is the difference between men's and women's average nominal monthly wage. This study extracted wage data from International Labour Organization average monthly earnings by sex and economic activity dataset and calculated accordingly. All of our independent variables were sourced from International Labour Organization database. Occupation segregation have a huge impact on the economy. However, due to limited data on wage inequality in occupations, we use sector segregation, measured by the ratio of women to men working in specific sectors. Our analysis examines three main sectors: agriculture, industry, and service, which can also be impacted by work experience. The relative age of the workforce and fertility rate is our two proxy variables, as there's no other way to measure job experience or time spent in labor force. The wage gap is calculated as the difference between men and women's average nominal monthly wages. However, this study employed the modified version that takes 0 whenever men's wage is less than or equal to women's wage. This emphasizes on the extent and frequency of wage disparities that disadvantages women and helps to isolate and analyze the specific condition and factors that contribute to wage gap or wage inequality where men are favored. For analyzing the relationship between macro level pay gaps and gender differences in aggregated productivity characteristic we will be using an extended Waka blinder decomposition model. In case of our methodology, I applied fixed effect analysis model, but found all of my variable to be insignificant, so which indicates data issues like heteroscedasticity or endogeneity. So I ran a modified wall test for heteroscedasticity and Ulrich test for autocorrelation. I found heteroscedasticity to be present in my data set, but no autocorrelation was detected. Then I applied robust standard errors and found my heteroscedasticity to be still present. Then I refitted the model against feasible generalized least squares model, and after that I have found my key variables to be significant and the heteroscedasticity issue were resolved. For the descriptive statistics, the differences between male and female average nominal monthly wage is 607, which indicates a gender disparity. This is the fixed effect analysis table. This demonstrates that my variables are not significant when I did the fixed effect analysis. This is the fixed effect analysis versus FGLS analysis model and the result. And this led to our findings, which is gender wage gap increases due to increase in young female worker and increase in female labor force participation rate. On the other hand, gender wage gap reduces due to increase in average years of schooling, increase in female workers in industry, and increase in fertility rate. Wage gap increased due to an increase in young female worker than men in the job market. Young workers don't have much experience and mostly start their careers at low paying job. Young workers, especially women, tend to be concentrated in lower paying job or position compared to their male counterparts. On the other hand, more female labor force participation rate than men tends to widen the gap. This can happen due to occupational crowding, skill gap, part-time work, increased labor force participation rate in service and informal sector, weak in unionization, etc. On the other hand, more industry participation favors the women in closing the gap. Industry sector jobs require specific skills, and women's presence in higher skills jobs contribute to their higher earnings. So they might have industry premium, which closes the gap. We have also found that there's an positive effect of fertility rate on gender wage gap, which is very interesting, implying an increase in fertility rate reduces the wage gap. Higher fertility rate can narrow the gap by supporting women's education and career growth. Countries with strong childcare and parental leave policy make it easier for women to work while raising children. For example, Sweden's accessible childcare system helped close its gap by 2021. Our findings aligned with previous literature, as Alden in 2021 found that increased female labor force participation rate can widen the gender wage gap due to occupational crowding into lower paying jobs, skill gaps, part-time work, and lack of unionization. At the same time, young workers across the European Union are less than the average wage gap. This aligns with our findings. Higher share of young female workers widen the wage gap. Now, what narrows the wage gap? We have found that our study is aligned with the previous literature, as the relationship between total fertility rate and female participation rate shifted from negative to positive by the late 1980s, was founded by Ann and Mira in 2002. Martinez and Isa in 2004 found that the skill premium for high-earning women raises fertility rates, while lower childcare costs encourage labor participation rate. Nordic countries achieve higher gender equality through high female employment and shared parental leave. A higher female to male share in industry also reduces the gap, as industry sectors with higher skill requirements tend to offer higher wages. This was found by Gropello on 2010. So we can say that if higher fertility rates counterbalance low-paid female labor from rising labor force participation rate, the skill premium for educated women helps narrow the wage gap. But how does it happen? Let's delve into that. We have found an interplay among our variables. We can say that for starters, education increases female labor force participation rate, which in turn increases unskilled and low-paying female labor force in the market, which in turn increases the gender wage gap. At the same time, this increasing trade of unskilled female labor force and gender wage gap can be mitigated by an increase in fertility rate. An increase in fertility rate decreases this unskilled female labor force because they have lower opportunity cost to get back into the market once they have children, and this in turn decreases the gender wage gap. But then, how does fertility rate narrows the wage gap? In this way, on the other hand, education and support system for mothers helps women with skill premium. What is skill premium? Skill premium refers to the higher wage earned by women with advanced education, experience, and skills, which is comparable to or even exceed these of men, contributing to narrowing wage gap.
Anyone keeping time? Because I'm not keeping time. Okay.
So education and support system for mothers help the women with skill premium, and they in turn helps in narrowing the gender wage gap. Now, for our policy recommendation, we recommended that implementation of vocational training and job readiness programs to equip young and unskilled female workers with market relevant skills and experience, focus on long-term workforce retention by addressing workplace discrimination, promoting equal pay policies, and creating pathways for women to advance in their careers. Other than that, creating higher paying jobs and industry development and mother-friendly workplaces and family support policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next presentation will be from Amirus Salihin Amin. Actually, this is also a co-authored paper, but Mr. Amin will make the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day. So my paper is titled Factors Affecting Unpaid Care Work in Households of Bangladesh, Findings from the Labor Force Survey of 2022. Firstly, I would like to show my gratitude to all the esteemed panel members here and for a chance to present my paper in this stage. My co-author is also present here, Mudassar Munawar Rajgir. We are both final year students from University of Dhaka. So let's look at the slides. And so a brief background to this study. Unpaid care work constitutes about caring for your own family members or taking care of the elderly and the sick. So we have seen that from previous studies that almost 76% of women, they contribute mostly to unpaid care work, whereas only, which is roughly 3.2 times more than men. Globally, the principal reason given by women of working age being outside of labor force is due to unpaid care work, whereas for men, it is only for being in education or being sick or disabled. Unpaid care work is one of the main obstacles for women from moving into better quality jobs, which affects the number of hours spent by women in work for pay or for profit. Their status and employment and working conditions are also affected. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these disparities and intensified the amount of unpaid care work provided by women and girls in particular. The references are given right beside these comments. So this was a brief background to why unpaid care work is important in our economy. Next, we can see that almost in 2023, 748 million people aged 15 and above were outside the labor force due to care responsibilities, of which 780 million were women and only 40 million were men. From another paper, we can see that as high as 29.1% of employed women are found to be engaged as unpaid family workers. This only includes employed women. So roughly 1/5 of employed women are in care work responsibilities. In our paper, we couldn't look into the valuation of unpaid care work, so we have taken help from other papers. There's a paper which suggests that the valuation of women's unpaid care work in Bangladesh is roughly 5,300 billion taka, which is equivalent to roughly 50% of the GDP in 2021. In Bangladesh, women's unpaid care work contribution in GDP equivalent terms is 5 times higher than the corresponding contribution by their male counterparts. So we can now all see that there's much importance to unpaid care work, which we often overlook or do not estimate due to lack of information or lack of methodologies. So in our paper, we have used the labor force survey data of 2022 and looked into what factors contribute to enabling more unpaid care work in our economy. Here's a brief literature review. There are some papers which have looked into this matter previously using the labor force survey of 2018 and 2013. Here's one paper from our one of the panel members as well, Dr. Sir Rizwanul Islam. And there are some papers which has looked into the economic evaluation of women's unpaid care work. There's also an ILO statistical brief about what these care responsibilities impact the woman. But our research focuses on the factors that will contribute to more unpaid care work in our economy or in a household. So this is how we have began our research. So the main dependent variable for our research was these 6 indicators of unpaid care work. So the labor force survey has a section in their questionnaire which has a question for own house services, which has 6 options, which shows that in the last 7 days, how much of the household member has contributed to these activities. So using the definition from the ILO, using the definition of ILO about care work, we have seen that both of them are quite similar. So we have decided to use the questionnaire from the LFS as a substitute for, as an indicator for unpaid care work. Our method includes a linear probability model. The dependent variable is hours spent in care services per week. And our logic model examines how variables will affect the probability of an individual being engaged in extensive care work. So our dependent variable is a categorical one. It is based on care hours per week. We have assumed that if care work exceeds 28 hours per week, that person is more prone to engaging in extensive care work. This assumption is based on previous studies. We have seen that from time use survey of 2021, women spend around 12 hours a day on care work, whereas men spend only 1.6 hours a day on care work. So we have roughly used an average for this estimate. So the findings are on the board. The linear probability regression shows that rural employed individuals do significantly more care work compared to unemployed rural individuals. Whereas for city corporations, it's the opposite. Unemployed individuals in city corporations do more care work. Higher education significantly reduces care work for unemployed individuals, and widowers are more prone to care work in both city corporation, rural and urban areas. Children contribute much less to care work, and the findings from the linear probability regression is quite intuitive. Now, if we look at the logic regression, we can see that the rural residents, are more likely to engage in unpaid care work. Employment significantly reduces unpaid care work because being employed forces you to give more time into your employment areas. Higher education levels reduce the likelihood of being engaged in unpaid care work. The presence of spouse reduces time spent on unpaid care work, which can be true for both men and women. Widowed individuals are more likely to engage in unpaid care work, and families with migrant workers are more likely to engage in unpaid care work as they have more, as they have to take care of their families as well as their migrant worker. And lastly, if you look at the gender variable, we can see that being female increases the likelihood of being engaged in unpaid care work. Now onto the gender-based logic regression. The gender-based logic regression differentiates between the probability of being engaged in unpaid care work for both men and women. We can see that rural individuals, whether men or women, contribute to more unpaid care work. Employment significantly reduces unpaid care work for both men and women. Being widowed is significantly corresponds to more unpaid care work, and having a migrant worker in your family also contributes to more unpaid care work. The interesting factor is that the last variable, we can see that older individuals perform less unpaid care work, which is also kind of intuitive. This slide shows the combined results from the logic regressions and the linear probability models. So our combined results show that rural individuals, and especially the employed ones, do more care work. Now, the reason behind this could be that in the questionnaire, it was mentioned that if the individual is actively participating in any kind of agricultural works or any kind of out of employment opportunities. So this can explain why rural individuals, especially employed ones, are more contributing to unpaid care work. Now, if we look into the higher education variable, we can see that higher education reduces care work, especially for unemployed individuals. The gender variable is also quite significant. Women are more likely to be engaged in unpaid care work. We have seen from both of linear probability model and logic regressions. And being married individuals do slightly more care work. And the constant or the baseline for this regression show that unemployed individuals do far more care work on average. So what should we do with this result? So we have some policy implications, and we have drawn some conclusion from these results of our regressions. We can see that the gender factors are the dominant constraints for women in attaining a superior position in the labor market. So we can focus on gender norm-centric policies, such as ensuring daycare facilities, extending the provision of maternity and post-maternity leave, and introducing flexible or part-time working hours. Government should ensure universal access to affordable, high-quality childcare, elder care, and health care. Strengthening maternity and paternal leave policies. For example, Saudi Arabia recently introduced a 12-week paid maternity leave scheme that can support women's employment. Formalizing the care sector, improving wages, and providing labor protection for domestic and care workers are also crucial. Challenging gender norms that place burdens solely on women through awareness campaigns and gender-sensitive education. This could also help alleviate the current situation in our economy. A toolkit by the UN Women suggests that transforming the 3R approach by the ILO to the 5R framework. The 3R approach only constituted of recognize, reduce, and redistributing unpaid care work, whereas the 5R framework also includes rewarding and representing paid care work in our economy. So in that way, we can showcase our impact on the economy of unpaid care work. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Very good use of time. Congratulations. Thank you. Our next presentation will be, I believe, virtual. Dr. Jyoti Thakur, Associate Fellow, National Institute of Social and Economic Change, India.
Yeah, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's my screen is shared or
Yeah, your screen is on.
it's on.
Can you go full screen on your presentation?
Yeah, it's fine now.
Yeah, it's fine. You can start.
Yeah, good morning, all. I'm Jyoti. I'm as a fellow in NCIR Delhi. Thanks, Sanem, for this opportunity. So the title of my paper is Urban Labor Market and Social Hierarchy, Caste and Gender and Employment. So I feel the background for my paper is already set by the chair as well as the presenter before me, because the chair was alluding to the idea that the discrimination or the gender market issues are not limited to the supply and demand side of it. There are more to the issues. And the presenter before me who was talking about, the gender wage gap, it's also putting some light on my paper, because, we know that the gender discrimination is there. But is it possible that that discrimination is because female are, restricted or, restricted to certain kind of jobs which are actually low paying jobs? So let's begin with the presentation. So as we know, this session is about the labor market issues. And I'm in my paper, which is still a work in progress. I'm trying to highlight one of the major issue specifically in context of India, in the society as a whole, as well as in the labor market. And the issue is related to the discrimination due to gender and the social identity, which is maybe caste identity or religious identity. So why urbanization? Because urbanization is, most of time, many times is, dubbed as the driver of social change in India and elsewhere also. And if we say in terms of Dr. Ambedkar's word, he described these urban spaces as emancipatory zones, because urban spaces, we feel that they provided opportunity and anonymity, which can be helpful to overcome the caste-based oppression. But despite all this, despite urbanization, caste and gender inequality continue to persist in India, specifically in labor market, and still occupational segregation or the division of labor along line of gender, caste, religion remains a powerful force which shapes the life chances or earning chances of marginalized community. So this study focus on examining the intersection of gender and caste in occupational segregation in 6 mega cities, uncovering pattern and inequality and their underlying causes. So why I'm focusing on mega cities? Because mega cities, they are epitome of urbanization in any nation. So I have set major 2 objectives, and the contribution of my paper I'm looking into, because there are so many studies which are talked about occupational segregation from a binary comparison. Maybe they are comparing men, women, rural, urban. But this paper, I have tried to nuance this problem and try to understand from an intersection perspective. So I have a specific 2 objectives from my paper. First is measure the level of occupational segregation across various social, religious, and gender groups. Second, I would like to explore how social, economic, and demographic factors contribute to segregation within labor market. So I have divided my literature view in this paper. One is theoretical literature view, the other is empirical. And in theoretical literature review, I have looked into human capital theory, discrimination theory, intersectional theory. We all know that human capital theory, they talk about the discrimination or the difference in outcome in the labor market because of as a result of a difference in education or skill. But discrimination theory says no, it is more because of certain taste of employer or the firms. And intersectionality theory that no, these are not a word is not into binary. They are various identity cutting across different things. So empirical, I have looked into Indian context and global. So the theoretical framework I'm using is local segregation framework, which is given by Villar and Rio in 2010, which uses multiple indicator to highlight the indices discrimination. And the segregation curve of this methodology is the USP of this methodology, which make people understand the level of segregation which is happening in any labor market. And the data source I have used is PLFS, which is a labor force survey of India 22-23 round unit level that I have worked with. So I have for this paper, I have analyzed NCO2 digit classification, which gave me around 39 occupation, broader grouping. I have looked into gender identity, how it affect the distribution across various occupations. I have seen social religious identity and as well as plugged in the demographic and social factor. So quickly, the results, this is the overall segregation. So So in various developed countries, there are
5 minutes is
many
over.
studies. Okay, there are various. So here we can see that in India, sociologist identity are more than gender identity. So this is, I'm showing male and female, how they are segregated. The yellow, sorry, the green line is the line of equality. The farther you go away from it, it means you are segregated. So here again, this is, now I would like to spend some time here. This is intersection of gender and sociologist identity, because in the last, we've seen like, male are segregated, some SC/ST grouping are segregated, but saying this only that this much is not enough to gauge the nuances, the problematic situation in a complex labor market like India. So we need to see how male from different caste category, how female from different caste categories are different, because social challenges and the labor market challenges affect male and female in a different manner. So here again, we can see the SC/ST women. I would like to highlight the female part. So SC/ST women and Muslim women, they sometimes start, they have a little bit similarity and as well as differences. So we can see that there are certain occupations in which Muslim women have upper hand than the SC/ST women. This can be possible because of the difference in their education level or networking capital, or it may be possible because SC/ST women face more discrimination in the labor market. So the next question which arises is, all the cities, all the mega cities in India are discriminatory? The answer to this is yes and no, because I would like to highlight here some groups, for example, for groups like SC/ST female and Muslim female, the coefficient of regression is not changing much, which says that their the discrimination or their occupation segregation is mostly driven by structural barriers such as education level and social capital, etc. Whereas for Hindu OBC, if you say the coefficient changes drastically from model 1 to model 2. Model 2 is we have plugged into city fixed effect for city level, which means OBC, the segregation of OBC male in different city varies differently. Because I would like to highlight that OBC group in India, it is a group which is identified by their caste occupational identity. So for example, cobbler, goldsmith, blacksmith, carpenter, etc. So it may be possible like in various cities, these occupations are, some of the occupations are present and some of them are not present, which is leading to their occupation segregation differences in different city. So yeah, so I would like to conclude that yes, urbanization, so does as urbanization, the question we have started with, does urbanization erase caste and gender based disparity? So for my answer is no, not right now. We are still struggling. Our urban spaces are still not emancipatory zones yet. Marginalized group remain excluded from diverse occupations, and policy must address this intersectional identity, because saying male and female is not enough. So we have to make it more nuanced. So here I would like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some way forward. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. And now we come to our last presentation. That will be done by Elisa Tavares. I don't know if I pronounced correctly. Again, on labor market outcomes. Labor market outcomes. And that will look specifically at the impact of one particular element in the labor market, impact of government age cutoff. So we go to the presentation straight away. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
We can see and see.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for having me today. Today I'm going to talk about this project with my co-author, Shahada Hussain, on the impact of government job age cutoff on labor market outcome of college graduates. Government jobs are often important career aspiration of a college graduate, and this is true in many countries, but particularly in the context of developing countries. These jobs can be very hard to obtain because normally there are a lot of people applying for such jobs, and that makes it highly competitive, but also they can demand rigorous preparation. And in our context, we are looking at Bangladesh civil service jobs, and these are particularly competitive given the BCS examination for the application to this job, and also because this job has an age requirement where applicants can apply up until they are 30 years old. And we are interested in the impact of these BCS jobs on the labor market overall because ex ante, the effect could be ambiguous. While we know that this intensive preparation for these examinations and the application process could enhance the skills of the applicants, at the same time, it can also have some unintended negative consequences by delaying applicants' participation in the labor market and prolonging unemployment. In this context, we ask, what is the effect of the BCS age cutoff on the labor market outcome of college graduates in Bangladesh? And we do so by estimating, and we answer this question by estimating the causal effect of being just above the age cutoff on labor market outcomes. And our main contribution of this paper is to our understanding of the role of public sector jobs on individuals' decision-making, particularly concentrating on the labor market, by providing evidence on the role of government job requirements, precisely age eligibility on labor market outcomes of college graduates. For our analysis, for our empirical analysis, we used the Bangladesh labor force survey from 2016 and to 2017. And given the requirements of the BCS jobs, we limit our sample to individuals that have at least an undergraduate degree, and also look at individuals that are on the range of 25 to 40 years old. In terms of our main variables of interest, we have 4 key labor market outcomes that we are interested to understand. First, we are looking at the labor force participation, which is a variable that is equal to 1 if individuals are employed or unemployed in the market, and 0 otherwise. And then conditional on labor force participation, we look at employment, which is a variable equal to 1 if the individuals are employed, and 0 if they're unemployed. And we also look at the labor earnings per month in Bangladeshi taka and hours worked per week. For our empirical analysis, we estimate a regression discontinuity design that estimate the causal effect of the government age cutoff. So we estimate this model in which we control for demographic controls such as gender and some other household characteristics, but we also control for the survey quarter-phase effects and control for the polynomial function to control for the distance from the age cutoff. And our variable of interest is this treatment effect, this treatment indicator, which is equal to 1 if the individual is as or older than the age cutoff, which is 30. Some things to keep in mind in terms of our estimation is that with our regression discontinuity design, we can only estimate the local average treatment effect around the age threshold, which is 30 years old. So this means that we are estimating the treatment effect of being just age ineligible for the BCS application process on the labor market outcome. Second, we identify the treatment effect by comparing—
We'll have 5 more minutes.
Okay, perfect. By comparing individuals that are just above the cutoff to those just below the cutoff. And to do that, the regression discontinuity design assumes that individuals near the age threshold are comparable in all respects except for treatment assignment. And to this be satisfied, we have two key assumptions: that there is no manipulation around the cutoff, and that the covariates are balanced across the threshold, and we show that this is true in our setting. Finally, when we do our estimation, we assume, or we use, a triangular kernel in an optimal bandwidth selection around the cutoff, and we show that using alternative specifications does not affect our results. Here are our main results. So the first thing that we show, that we find, is that there is no effect of the BCS age cutoff on labor force participation. However, we do find some effect on labor market outcomes. Particularly, this effect is coming from employment. Specifically, we find that college graduates at age 30 are 7.1 percentage points more likely to be employed than those that are just below the cutoff. Moreover, we don't find any other effect. We don't find any effect of the cutoff on earnings and on hours worked per week. Moreover, we also do our estimation, our main estimation, using the sample of individuals with no undergraduate degree. We treat this sample as a placebo sample, given that irrespective of their age, these individuals will not be eligible due to their educational attainment. And indeed, we don't find any effect of that, which gives credibility to our results. Furthermore, we also explore whether there is any effect of the cutoff on the type of jobs that these individuals are working on. And we do find that those individuals that are just above the cutoff are more likely to work on unpaid family work. They are more likely to work in high-skill industry, and they are less likely to work on larger fields. So to summarize, we find that in this paper, we find that government jobs age requirement leads to some delay in employment, given that we find that those that are no longer eligible, that are college graduates, increase employment relative to eligible ones. While we don't find like super strong effect on other labor market outcomes, such as earnings and hours worked, it does mask some contrasting effect on the age cutoff that is coming from the type of jobs that these are working. Indeed, we find that those that delay earnings, that those that are just above the cutoff are more likely to work on occupations and firms that would offer them lower earnings, and that also offer them fewer opportunities for career growth. And this could lead to some long-lasting negative consequences on their labor market outcomes due to these delays. And that's it. I think I'm on time, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, we had a very smart presentation, maintaining the time. I suppose we can now move on to our discussion, the designated discussion. Kashfi Ryan, and I believe she can have 15 minutes to make her comments and observations on the paper. Kashfi Ryan, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here at the 8th SANEM Annual Economics Conference. I sincerely thank SANEM for organizing this platform, and I want to thank the paper presenters for their valuable contributions to labor market research. I actually went through the first two papers rigorously. Unfortunately, due to time and commitment constraint, I couldn't go through the last two papers, paper 3 and paper 4, more rigorously, what I would have wanted. But the 4 papers discussed in these sessions actually address four issues: wage inequality, unpaid care work, employment hierarchy in India, and the impact of government policies in the job market. So my discussion will follow main three key aspects. What is the relevance of the papers to each study? The strength of methodology of these papers, and if there is any areas of improvement or if it has any policy implications for Bangladesh. So the first paper is by Ms. Sabiha Sharmin. I really enjoyed your paper. It's a well-written paper. It's just, you need to kind of rearrange it a bit. So I think one of the strength of the paper is it's a macroscopic analysis, and it uses the ILO stat database covering 43 economics from 2017 to 2021. I just want to commend the author for tackling an incredibly important issue, the gender wage gap. And this study brings valuable insights by examining both the micro and macro variable factors that influence wage gap, and applies country level and time fixed effects for unobserved heterogeneity. And she used feasible generalized least square. It's also a strength as it attempts to correct the heteroscedasticity, making the results more reliable. However, as I discussed, my role is to critically engage with the study, and so I think there are a few more areas of the paper should consider. First, you have already mentioned that this is an unbalanced panel data set, and when you work with a cross-country data, it's always challenging to find data availability. The 43 countries that you have included in the study, unfortunately, Bangladesh is not one of them. I was looking forward, like if Bangladesh could be included, but the thing is, it introduces bias, and I think some countries, you already mentioned it in your limitation, are probably first world countries which are more overrepresented, while others are maybe underrepresented, and it potentially affects the general ability of the findings. I think if you just could explain it more from literature review support, it would be better. And the second thing is the issue of endogeneity. While the study does a great job because you have include country fixed effect, but it doesn't fully tackle the potential reverse causality. For example, does a higher female labor force participation rate leads to lower wage? Or do lower wages actually discourage women from entering in the workforce? So without addressing this, I think the causality in some of the results remain uncertain. You just could add it. And I would ask you to go through the paper by Sharma, which was published in 2018 in PLOS ONE journal. And the title of the paper is Health and Economic Growth, Evidence from Dynamic Panel Data of 143 Years. I think it will help you to kind of deal with the endogeneity issue. And I just wanted to ask you, or if you could add in your paper, that why didn't you use lag-dependent variable model or the general method of moments rather than using a GLS? I think it would enrich your paper, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you. The second paper also addresses a very critical issue, the gender burden of unpaid care work in Bangladesh, and it contributes valuable insights into which factors actually influence care work in households within Bangladesh. And the relevance of this study is undeniable. It highlights the disappropriate burden of unpaid care work, especially to women. And you used both linear regression and logic models, so the findings actually are more solid. And I think I have only three comments. The first thing is the causality versus correlation. While this study identifies correlation, it cannot establish causality because it's a cross-section data. And I think if future research using longitudinal data, it will help clarify whether changes in employment situation actually leads to changes in hours of unpaid care work. And the other thing is, I feel like if you would have used informal care network or community level factors as an explanation to why unpaid care work is more is more burdened to women rather than men. And I feel like there's Sajada Amin has papers on unpaid work and domestic work, and they actually explain inter-household bargaining as a tool to like why unpaid work exists. Just I think if you like rigorously do a bit of literature review to add value to your paper. And I know you have mentioned that you couldn't address economic valuation of unpaid care work, and if it's possible in future using shadow pricing or timing surveys, and it will give important insights as in terms of influencing policy discussion. And as I have gone through your paper, I think you need a lot of editing to do, but the paper is good, the method is good. Thank you. The last three papers, okay. The paper 3, which discusses the nexus of gender and caste system in India. It's an important contribution because it's moving beyond simple gender comparison to examine how caste and religion actually shape labor market segregation. So the key takeaway of this study is caste and religion actually drives more segregation rather than gender. And I just have I think because it's still a paper in progress, and I think if the author actually could discuss more why the Hindu, SC/ST female and Muslim female, they're actually the segregation is more prominent to them compared to other groups. And if they could discuss more in the patterns of segregation and why this parity exists. And I think also if because she has also addressed occupational segregation, if she could say that like if the high paid jobs they are more inclusive rather than low low skill or low paid jobs. And I think if sociological and economic explanations would be more added in this paper, it will be easier for audience to understand why this segregation exists. I'll just ask that this policy recommendation lacks empirical backing from her results. She just focus on that. The fourth paper is actually, I don't know if I can comment on this because it's really well written. I couldn't find like any problems with methodological issues, and everything was really good. And it's actually used the regression discontinuity design, which is the major strength of this paper. It actually makes a credible causal inference between the age cutoff. Because this paper actually focused on the impact of BCS job age on the employment decision making of youth. And it highlights how individuals in below the 30 years delay entering the workforce, holding out for the government job. And while people or youth over 30 are more accept to, take available jobs, even if they're paid lower wages. And I think it just, if it could explain more, like what is the underlying mechanism on why people actually, want this BCS job? Because, in Bangladesh labor market, government job or more people who actually are the availability of government job is very few. So whether this could actually distort this labor market, probably it could distort the unemployed educated youth labor market, but I'm not so sure it would distort the whole labor market. And if she could answer like what is the policy recommendation would be like, should the age cutoff be adjusted, or would the government use alternative incentives to reduce this labor market friction? Otherwise, I think this is an excellent paper. And yeah, thanks again all the presenters. I actually I learned a lot after going through your papers, so thank you.
Thank you. I think our discussion has done an excellent job covering all the 4 papers, making very detailed comments. And now I think we can open the floor for some comments, questions, very sharply raised. You have just a minute per person. So the shorter, the better. Yeah, I think you started here and then here, but then the 3 at the back. So for the moment, let's start with these 5. And if we have time, I'll come to you two, okay? Thank you. Yeah, please start. Keep it brief.
First of all, congratulations. I have a remark. The use of linear probability model may not be the best choice for estimating the likelihood of engaging in care work, as it assumes constant marginal effects and can produce probability outside the 0 to 1 range. I think a probability model can be appreciable here. So why did you choose linear probability models over other models like probability? Thank you.
Thank you. My question would be to Sabiha Sharmin. I have a methodological question, which is why did you choose fixed effects analysis over the econometric models like random effects or difference in difference, and what were the key justifications for using feasible generalized least squares instead of sticking solely to fixed effects? Thank you.
I think, yeah, this, and then, excuse me, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, and then before you give to 2 of them, I think 3 at the back, okay? In that sequence. Yes, yes, of course. I'm seeing all of you. Okay, please.
My question is to Sabiha's paper. So, because we're dealing with wage discrimination, right? So, see, your literature should also focus on the Golding's work, because Golding is showing how what is the role of history behind discrimination, right? That is the first one. The second one is that in your literature also 2 papers are missing. The paper by Gary Bakers, because discrimination is of 2 types. One is test-based and the statistical discrimination. So you should look into Gary Baker's paper and Kenneth Arrow's paper, right? And the third technical point is that you are dealing with nominal wage difference. So I fail to understand that why you are using that. Because nominal wages are affected by inflation, the price variation. That will again lead to problem of endogeneity, right? So rather you should have taken real wages, and that to not absolute gap, but relative wage gap, right? And this is only my comments. Thank you.
And now the 3 of them at the back, okay? So you decide who will go first, okay? And then we go back.
Hello, thank you so much. So my first question is to the second paper. So you said in your policy recommendations that we should have universal care systems in place so that it takes away the pressure away from the women. So why are we focusing on universal care systems rather than focusing on how to better like include the men into the care system within the households, like policy that can take that perspective in account? So that's my question for the second paper. And there's a question for the third paper about the occupation segregation. So you said that in urbanization isn't really helping or like isn't really affecting the segregation much. Could it be that occupation segregation based on caste, they tend to cluster in areas, like they have this sort of cluster in their specific locations that could like make their entry into other jobs difficult because they are like bound in this area and this job. Thank you so much.
Hello, so my question is for Elisha Debari, is that could the decrease in government job eligibility be offset by individuals shifting into other high skill sectors? Also, how does the impact of the cutoff compare to private sector hiring trends?
Hello, everyone. I have a couple of questions. First, to the second paper. How does Bangladesh's unpaid care work compare with other South Asian countries? Like, would a comparative analysis strengthen the findings or not?
And I have a question for the first paper. Ma'am, your findings suggest that higher female labor force participation can widen the wage gap. How do you address potential policy misinterpretations where increasing labor force participation rate may be seen as harmful rather than beneficial? Thank you.
Thank you. And now we come to, yeah.
Actually, my question seemed to the lady here, and my question was to Sabiha Samin ma'am, that your findings suggested that the wage gap could reduce the, I'm sorry. Yeah. So you suggested that the higher female labor participation can widen the wage gap. But in other circumstances, in situation, it may be different. So like in other cases, it may seen as harmful or maybe the other way. So did you think about it when you did the paper? Like, or maybe the data suggested? Thank you.
Hello, my question is also to Sabia Zarmin ma'am. There was this saying that a higher female labor participation widens the wage gap. How do your findings compare to Nordic economics, where higher female there tends to be higher female labor participation but a lower wage gap?
Excellent. Okay, I think I will take one more question. Yeah.
My question is to Dr. Elisa Tamaras. As you discussed the job age cutoff, does the delay in employment have long-term career consequences, such as lower lifetime earnings or slower career progression? And have the authors considered a follow-up study using a longitudinal data set?
I think we can take a couple of more questions if there are any. Is there anyone else who is very keen to ask questions? If not, we can then go back to the authors of the papers, the presenters, and give them maybe 3 minutes each, because there has been quite a few questions to address to the authors. So we will start in the same order. Sabiha Sharmin first.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your questions and comments. For the first questions, why did I choose fixed effect instead of random effect or DID? Basically, it helps control for unobserved individual characteristics that might be correlated with both gender and wages, like innate ability or career aspiration, which could bias the result if treated as random. The second question was, I think higher labor force participation rate can widen the wage gap. Why is it harmful rather than beneficial? What I have found from my findings and previous literature, that higher labor force participation rate means there's a possibility of unskilled labor force coming into the, unskilled labor coming into the labor force as well. So unskilled labor force, and especially women, tend to go into the jobs that pay low wages. They tend to be concentrated on that area. So when that happens, the higher labor force participation rate indirectly widens the wage gap, because their effect, the unskilled labor force effect, is manifested on this level. And the last question, I was unable to understand the last question. If you could repeat again, the Nordic economist one.
Nordic economics has a higher female labor force participation, but it has lower gender wage gap. So how does your findings compare to that?
The Nordic economics has since this is a literary, when I researched for the literature, I found that this is a policy, this is for policy implication. I have suggested this for policy implication because this could be an example how they reverse the situation. This could be a example for every country and for us as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we then move on to the second author, Amirus Salihin Hamim?
Thank you for your questions. The first question was that why did I use the linear probability model instead of a probability model? So the linear probability model showcases if there's a linear relationship between the variables and the dependent variables. So at first I was interested to look into it because if there was it in any linear relation, then I could perhaps show it in our paper. But then I could see that the coefficients were not what I had expected. Some were not insignificant even. So I shifted to logic regressions. I should use a probability model, but I think I opted for a logic model because it was more easy for me to estimate, and I will try to use a probability model next time. The second question is why the policy recommendation part, that why universal care system, why not include men in care work? So my policy recommendations were more than one. So you can see that the first policy recommendation was to introduce universal healthcare systems. And for the gender norms, we can actually we should also focus on campaigns that actually address gender norms rather than only creating more policies or more systems that will take, I think, more time to enact. So the gender norms are very sophisticated and deeply rooted in our society. So we should also focus on campaigns that can address them. The universal care system is actually more applicable for a broader population because we can see that the unpaid care work is not only limited to women. Men also can contribute to it. And sometimes there are widowers, sometimes there are elderlies who contribute to unpaid care work. So only programs for women may not be effective for them who are elderly or who are perhaps widowed, but maybe including men in more unpaid care work may have an influence overall in combating the gender norms. So yes, it's a possibility that including men in care work may have a greater influence on over the whole scenario. And to the last question, why the comparison between other countries. So for the literature review, I solely focused on Bangladesh perspective because I found that there were far few literature available on Bangladesh. So my study mainly focused on Bangladesh's inner labor market. But when I searched, I found that there are multiple studies conducted on Philippines, Mexico, and other Asian countries. There are reports by ILO on South Asian countries. So there are comparisons to be made. So we can also draw conclusions. We can also learn from policy recommendations from other countries as well, which I could not show in my paper. So I will also keep in mind that to include them in future. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now we go to the third author. Dr. Jyoti Thakur, I believe, will be.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. Yes. So thank you for the question. It's a very intriguing question, actually. So as I mentioned, this is a paper in making. I'm still thinking how to improve on it. And this question, I think it can help me. But right now, I can say that the methodology I'm adopting, it is taking care of all the levels of education, actually, or sorry, occupation. It's because the organization is not helping. Maybe it can be the reason because people from certain groups are concentrated in certain localities or maybe occupations also. But my methodology, it compare across all the occupations, low end as well as the high end. So yeah, thank you for this question. I will explore and dig more into the question, but right now I can say that methodology is it's not looking into the location of it. So it is highly unlikely that their concentration in certain part of the city is leading the urbanization, leading the occupational segregation. It may be other way around too. And even in higher education, if you see the graph, even in higher level of occupation, there are discrimination. So right now I have that much only. Maybe in future, I will look into this question more. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go back to the fourth author, Elisa Taveras. Please.
Okay, thank you so much for all the questions. I might not go in like a perfect order, but first, there was a question regarding whether high-skilled jobs are like offsetting the negative effect of waiting for employment. And indeed, yes, that's true. That's why we don't find any effect on earnings, or we believe we don't find an effect on earnings and hours worked, because at the same time that the earnings are decreasing because of the fact that they are more likely to work in unpaid labor, unpaid family work, and also smaller firms. They're also more likely to work in high skill industries, given that they have a college degree. And one of the other questions asked whether we are exploring longer term effect. This is a little difficult to answer given, the data constraints. However, we are exploring some other other short-term outcomes using panel data, and that's still a work in progress to add to this paper, or maybe a follow-up paper. In terms of whether this higher weight unemployment is creating a higher weight on unemployment, whether that's creating inefficiency in the economy. Indeed, yes, we do believe that our results show that it's creating some market distortion, but this is true for everyone, and this is much larger for unemployed individual. And I know that somebody asked whether we are exploring the private sector. We can't separate that in our sample. We can only see our results for basically everyone that is below and just above the cutoff, just looking at the threshold. And finally, I also wanted to add that we are exploring policy implications, but right now our paper is kind of concentrating on highlighting these inefficiencies of the cutoff, but we need more research to come up with some, policy suggestion and exploring other, maybe thinking about like the effect of other age cutoff or attempts to age cutoff in other contexts. So thank you so much. I hope I answered everything.
Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the responses, and I now find that I have a little more than sorry. Surely, you may.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. My question is to the second author. I wanted to know more about the definition of care work, as you have compared the rural areas to the urban ones, and we know that in rural areas where the breadwinner may be employed, he may also be engaged in household works that may add economic value, such as working in his backyard or for maintenance work, and that also applies to urban regions. So, did you separate the effect of work that might not have economic value, but also may not be included in the definition of a care work? So, if you have included those types of activities, what would its impact be on your results? In summary, we know that the maintenance works and the household works, done by the male participant in the house, that might not be included in the research. So what would be the difference in the result if you had included that in the definition of Tier 1? I hope I am clear about it.
Okay. So would you like to take a minute? Okay.
I have used the dataset from the labor force survey, as the labor force survey has a predetermined questionnaire. So in the questionnaire, there's a section called own household services. So in that questionnaire, there's only 6 options. So I can tell you the 6 options, but to give you an overview, there's cooking and cleaning clothes and cleaning utensils, shopping, caring, and other services. So in the last part, other services, there may be more than one activities going around, but the more details are not present in the data set. So it's not possible for me to include if the agricultural part may have any different impact on the unpaid care work. But as the labor force survey is done very meticulously, we can say that the economic part is actually included in the survey. Only the rest of the part that is unpaid and also contributes to care work is showcased in this question, in this section of the question. So yeah, so this, I hope this answers your question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now I think we can say that we have ended all the presentations, discussants' remarks, questions and answers, and so on and so forth. And I see that we still have 5 minutes. Very unusual because normally in seminars, one overshoots the time allocated and the chair would hardly have any time for making any observations. But now I can make a few observations. First, of course, thanks and congratulations to all of you. First to the authors, the discussant, the audience, for a very good session, in particular for maintaining the time, for being so sharp. I think a special congratulation is due for that. Secondly, I must say I'm very impressed by all the papers that have been presented here. Very sharply focused, objectives brought out, stated very clearly, good methodologies used, although questions have been raised by our discussant and others here, very searching questions. I was very nervous, but I'm glad that my PhD is over. But those of you who will be working on your research degrees, you will have to be careful. But I think we have made a good start here, and we can see a good bright, promising future from here. If I may, if you don't mind my saying so on these issues, I think I've noticed one thing. All the papers used very sound methodologies, econometric methodologies. They have found appropriate data, some limitations, of course, you have pointed out. And they have also used the data, the results to draw some conclusions. I suppose this is the standard framework you can see in research articles, journal articles, and so on and so forth. But it would be useful, particularly from a policy point of view, if you could delve a little deeper into the data, the implications of the results, and so on and so forth, rather than limiting them, limiting your observations to the significance of the variables and so on and so forth. I hope you don't mind my saying so. We can go a little beyond that. And my final, I think I can you hear me? Yes. Okay. My final remark is, what do we take from here? Okay, then I don't need to strain my voice. Okay. The final remark, because most of the papers, I think here, dealt with some kind of discrimination, differences, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, what do we take from here? I haven't heard one particular term which is very popular in labor economics, active labor market policies. I suppose we can look a little more into that and see if there is anything that we can take from there. And my final remark would be that we can do a few things. Discrimination, because we started with that word. How do we end discrimination? And in order to do that, there are different ways. Affirmative action, of course, is one to end discrimination. But empowerment is also a very, very important item in our basket of policies. And in order to empower, raising capability, if I may use the term, the famous term introduced by Amartya Sen some time ago. And capability can be raised in different ways: education, training, through better health, and so on and so forth. And in that context, active labor market policies would come again. So with those words, I think we can conclude this session. Again, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you. Certificate to the authors. So, only to the authors? Yeah, or not to the discussion. Yeah, not such a matter. The authors wrote only one paper. The discussion read 4 papers. Okay, so it's my pleasure now to present certificates to the authors, Sabiha, Amirus Salihin, and what about the virtual authors? They don't get anything? They will be presented online. Or they will be presented virtually. I hope it's real. Even though okay. Thank you.